Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of La Vida Baseball Live. I'm Julie Alexandria with Jennifer Mercedes and Ozzie Guillén Jr. Happy Monday, November 2nd. When last we left off, the Dodgers claimed their victory as the 2020 World Series champions. And now we see you again this week, and two managerial seats have been filled. One up is still up for grabs in Boston. We have lots to get to. Hope you guys had a happy Halloween this past weekend. How you doing?
Happy Halloween. Yeah, it was nice to see a lot of the players dress up with their families, and that was nice.
I have one regret. I should have been more authentic with my costume selection. I saw a lot of fans out there have some really cool ideas around the baseball world. I think I might have to have one for the next Halloween or Carnival around some decisions that were made in baseball that we're going to talk about today that I think would have been a funny costume.
Ozzie, spoiler alert, do they involve trash cans?
You know what? They don't involve trash cans because I think a lot of people have already had a great focus. Some of these outfits were amazing, especially the ones that were like as a family. Mm-hmm. I think it's more focused on the people that were responsible for those trash cans that allowed that to happen. Because this wasn't when you had the costumes. Actually, they were really big when I was in college. The people and the steroids and the injections, and that was only based on one player. I think that we've made it about the players again in this situation. They were only allowed to get so far with that because of mismanagement of the people that are responsible for them not to be able to do things like that. So I wanted to see how I could make a really cool costume around that whole story that would kind of bring in the news story that we have now.
It's so meta. I mean, only true baseball fans would get it. But Ozzie, to your point, let's get right to it. The people in charge of the people who are making and enacting those major decisions. Two managerial seats have been filled since we last saw you guys. We've got Tony La Russa coming out of retirement to helm the Chicago White Sox. And we've got AJ Hinch, who just served his 1-year suspension or 1 season-long suspension for his implication with the Astros cheating scandal. And now he is the new head coach of the Detroit Tigers. Now, of course, with anything, there are good parts and some not so good parts to these. But quick take, Jen, what was your sort of first reaction and what do you make of these decisions?
So AJ Hinch was probably the one that I was most disappointed about, just because it was like 60 games and okay, you're back. And I'm sure he's like, he's a nice guy and everybody deserves a second chance. It just seemed like too soon on that end. But then with Tony La Russa, I'm more open to the idea. I know that there was a lot of criticism as far as his age, and then his political stance, and not political stance, I'm sorry, but his view on the protests and players taking a knee and all of that sense. So but I'm more open to it, especially after hearing more stories come out and anecdotes come out about how he's acted in certain situations. I also like to hear, I like what Ozzie Senior had to say. He was his first manager, and he had a lot of really good takes on how Tony could better this White Sox team. And then I read in this article that he was one of the few who actually contacted Bruce Maxwell after he had been exiled basically from baseball for taking a knee. And even though they differ on their views, he came to an understanding, as far as what Bruce said, he came to an understanding as to why players take a knee, that it's not disrespecting the flag. And I think that that's important. I think that needs to be talked about, because I am one who was like, wait, is this even going to work? Because we have somebody like Tim Anderson on that team, and this is a young generation team. This is a 2020, like I've been saying, birthed a new type of player. These players are not going to care when it comes to speaking up and speaking out on issues that concern not only baseball, but concern, the world around us. So when you have that going into 2021, it does matter what your manager thinks. It matters because you don't want tension inside that clubhouse. So there needs to be a certain level of respect on both ends. And I think that we will have that. So it's just a matter of let it play out and let's see what happens.
Mm-hmm. I agree with all of that. Ozzie, I want to hear from you. Obviously, being very close to the White Sox franchise, what did you make of this move?
I said, damn, Tony wants to manage again? Okay, cool. You know what? At his age, with everything that he's been able to accomplish, it takes someone in his position to make that decision. I think that in-game managerial managing, there's nobody that better than Tony. Analytics, the part that I think that Tony has to do something about, and this is something that I think is, even for Ozzie's generation, something that is super important. Number one, Tony is bilingual. He speaks Spanish perfectly, which I think would help him a lot. Is these guys need to get to know Tony, okay? As well as Tony needs to get to know these guys. He knows them on the field, but he needs to get to know them personally. Tony comes from an age in baseball where my father grew up in that age. I grew up in that age of baseball of don't ask, don't tell, okay? It was the age of look the other way. Domestic violence, we look the other way. And I say we because I was a part of it. I've known of players that had done it, and you would look and say, oh, yeah, he's being held by the team. But you really didn't express your emotions to that player, how you really felt about that. You just worried about the game and the team. That's not the game today. And that falls into situations when it comes to protesting. A mistake that people are making is every player can take a knee for different reasons, okay? So everything's linked to Kaepernick. I think that Tony's position now, any managers, is, am I going to be okay for any player voicing any of their opinions at any given moment for anything that might arise? You know, because I think that next year they might be taking a knee for something completely different, okay, than what we're living through right now. So I think that for Tony and that generation of managers, understanding that these players are going to be vocal, number one, and before you go out and make a statement publicly that you need to go and talk to this person and get both sides and understand where they're coming from. I think that he needs to call TA, he needs to call Giolito, and have that conversation that he had with Bruce Maxwell and understand of why they're doing this. I feel that that's the biggest mistake we made as fans, we made as a media, and we made as from the NFL. That we did not understand what Kyle Kaepernick was doing, and then we let all this story get completely out of control. I think now looking back, I think that you want to have that conversation, even as a teammate. If your teammate's doing something, before going on to the media on Twitter and judging him, it's having that conversation. So I think Tony is going to be able to do that, because it was funny and ironic, because some people might have an issue with the flag situation on that White Sox team for the 25, 28 players, and some guys might care, some guys might be indifferent, some guys might think it's a big deal. But everyone wanted AJ Hinch. I feel like everyone would have a point about this guy cheated in our game. So again, it's those conversations that you need to have. I think Tony now, I think he's done a great job talking to the media, but I think that the White Sox have never had such an important spring training, because it's not just TA, it's Moncada, it's Eloy, it's everything. So I think that it's that connection that they need to make between that generation of baseball and this generation of baseball, and make sure they can work together.
And aside from the social justice issues, right? You, like you said, you have all of these now young players and swagged out players, right? These are all guys who will go up, bat flip. They've got the chains. They've got that swagger. So something I said on Twitter the other day was, as long as Tony can manage his game the way that he manages without compromising the vibe of this entire team, then I'm good. Like, as long as he can kind of gel in with that vibe and understand that this is a new generation of players. Like, you cannot go to your guy and say, don't swing 3-0 because it's going to make us look bad. And because I know that he had something to say. He was not for Tatis Jr. swinging 3-0. And look what happened to that team after that moment. That was a singular moment with the Padres that I think that was the moment that led them to get to the postseason. You know?
And it's Tatis, and I think it's Tatis, and this is a part where Tony needs to talk to someone, is where was Tatis's intentions of when he swung 3-0? I don't think at one moment it was for him to try to show up the other team. I don't think it even crossed his mind.
And it wasn't even, and I don't think that it was also, oh, let me hit a grand slam because
he was just
for my numbers.
Correct. I think it was a situation where, when I was watching the game, I'm going to give you an example. When I was watching the game and he did it, at no point in my mind, again, I'm only 36 years old, that I think unsportsmanlike at all. So I feel like when we judge someone for doing something, when he talks about unsportsmanlike, I really have to understand where the players are coming from. And I think that's the difference of the generation and the gap.
Exactly.
My biggest rule, which I think it's the biggest joke, is when guys get out running over the pitcher's mound, okay? It's a big rule that you're not supposed to do that. Well, I've been part of instances where guys just do it and they don't even think about it. You're just running, you're out, and they make a big deal about it. But if there was no malice intent of doing it, I think that there's things that you can do or say in the game of baseball while being in the rules of the game that have more malice intent than you actually having fun and hitting a grand slam and wanting to hit a home run. Again, I think that generation has changed, and I think a couple of Tony's comments he's understanding that the guys are doing things now that before might have been looked at unsportsmanlike. Now it's just part of the game.
Also, like, you have somebody like Tim Anderson that bat flips whenever he can, right? Like, maybe this is a moment when he will look at the other side of things and like, okay, you know what? If we're losing like 5 runs and I just scored the first run, maybe I'm not going to bat flip because we're still losing by a lot of runs. You know what I mean?
Read the room.
Read the room. Read the room. And I think that goes for both sides. And I think in our meeting this morning, we talked about also how Tony can now be seen, not because of his age, but more because of his experience, like the grandpa in the room, in the sense that when you're a parent, you are more strict. You have to, the kids got to follow these rules, A, B, and C. But once you become the grandparent, it's like, you let certain things slide. And you also learn from your first generation of kids that, oh, you know what? Yeah, that worked, but I could do it another way. And I think that also may come into play with this team.
And let's be honest, Tony cares about one thing only, and one thing is winning. It's winning. Right. If he knows that this team needs to be swagged out to win, we might see Tony wearing a chain in the middle of the game, high-fiving guys, because his goal is to be number 2 on that all-time list. That's what I really think.
Okay,
Go ahead, Julie. No, I was just going to say that there's something to be said also as far as the process of hiring Tony went. I think that there was a lot of people that were uncomfortable with it. We all knew it was going to Tony, right? Like, that's who they wanted. I did, Ozzie said, at least he didn't waste anybody's time. As far as that goes, but there is something to be said about having those meetings with people who matter and actually making it matter, like meaningful interviews. Ozzie, you guys talked about how Ozzie Sr. being interviewed for for the team. He wasn't the one who was actually the one that they wanted. And it was after the interview that they were like, you changed our mind. So I think that there's that process that people were uncomfortable with, especially in 2020, because we all know how many diverse candidates are out there. And to see, again, a white, old male to be hired and to be the number 1 to be hired for this, it was like, well, what was that process like? And I think that's what some people are uncomfortable with as well.
Absolutely. And in the interest of time here, I'll just say that, you also have to take into account where the teams are, right? You've got the White Sox who, by all intents and purposes, they're in a win now position. So it would make sense that they would be looking for a veteran manager who has some rings to his name. And it really looks, the people who had or took issue with him, their biggest concern, and one that I have as well, is can his views evolve to the point where he can come to a middle ground, with the guys on his team. And Ozzie, in hearing you speak about it, I hope that is the case. And I would love to see him swagged out in a chain. That I would make
he's 76, but he looks like he plays a part, the way that he takes his life and the way that he's got a swag about him. He acts like he's 50. He's always had that I'm the smartest guy in the room, that swag, that energy. And again, I think one thing that I didn't like about was putting his views to age, because I know that there's people that are younger than me, and I'm 36, that have really bad views. So the fact that views have nothing to do with age, and I think Tony, part of his growth and his wisdom is being able to have those conversations and understand that now players don't react to the Napoleon, I'm the leader, it's my word or the highway. I think now baseball's more about, what is my player thinking? Let's talk. And I feel like this might be another chapter in his book.
That's such a millennial thing to say, too.
Yeah, and he's got to adapt to that. He's got to adapt to that world of baseball. And again, can he do it? I think that he's had so much success in the past with managing different individuals that he is the right guy. Out of the old guys in that group, I think Tony is the guy with the most experience that can make that adaptation that much easier.
He's the coolest old guy in the room. Okay, let's move on to Boston. Does Christian Vasquez know something that we don't? Check out this tweet. We've got Alex Cora, who, of course, took this past year off. He abdicated his spot as the manager of the Boston Red Sox. And here he is with the trophy. And Vasquez tweets, hey, let's do it again. What do you think? He says, let's repeat. What do you think, Alex Cora? So what do we think? Alex Cora is one of the 5 candidates that is up for that seat. And of course, their president of baseball ops had said, I'm not discussing his name right now. But after a long period of silence, we see about 5 names being mentioned. Alex Cora is one of those names. What are his chances?
I think, yeah, I mean, if AJ Hinch, who was the manager at the time with the Houston Astros, all right, he wasn't a player, he wasn't a coach, he was the manager, he was the head honcho. I keep wanting to repeat that because I need that to sink into MLB's heads. So if he got a chance, then most definitely Alex Cora deserves this second chance, especially since really nothing came of the findings and he was the one that left the position so that attention wouldn't be drawn, from the team and on him. So I think, yeah, he deserves a second chance for sure. Will we see it happen? I don't know.
Oh, it better happen.
Wrong, Boston?
Oh, it better happen. It better happen because Alex was hired in Boston with all these rumors circulating around the Astros. Let's not be naive. They knew who they were hiring. They knew what might be going on there. Alex was able to win. And through the investigation of Major League Baseball, they found no wrongdoings. Trust me, if Major League Baseball had found, if the Red Sox had done anything from trash cans to signs to whatever they had come up with, Alex would be banned right now from Major League Baseball, and they probably would have removed his name from the championship trophy. Let's just be honest. They didn't find him at fault for that. If AJ Hinch is allowed to come back and he was the head honcho, Alex deserves this because the Red Sox were just trying to be a little bit more diligent in letting him go because of the controversies. Same thing with the Mets and Beltran. If it was somebody else that Beltran didn't get the job, I'd be asking him to go back. But Vasquez gets it. Alex did a great job in Boston. They know they can win with him. He deserves to be back. And there's a lot of great candidates on that list. But I think that it makes sense for Alex Cora to go back to Boston because if AJ Hinch is allowed to be back in the game of baseball, so does Alex. Remember, AJ Hinch, people forget, he pretends that he wasn't the guy, but he ridiculed the Yankees when they brought up cheating in that whole press conference. He's got to Google it. So I think if that's the route that we're going, where we're going to forgive these individuals after a short 60-game season, then Alex deserves his job back, and no one can ever talk about, again, cheating and us judging any type of players. Open up the Hall of Fame. Robinson Cano, Hall of Fame when he retires. A-Rod, let them all in.
Also, I mean, we were talking about this when we talked about AJ Hinch and Tony La Russa, that whole process of how that interview process has gone. I mean, somebody who's been vocal about, never getting that second interview and being the token Latino or the token minority to be interviewed was Sandy Alomar Jr. And we saw what he was able to do with the Cleveland Indians this year, having basically been their manager, right, for most of the season. So we need to stress that C-League rule. I don't know how you make it so that it's not, okay, yeah, we're okay with just interviewing the guy and then you don't even take him into account. Like, I don't know how that works, right? I don't know how you make that work.
And that's my issue. And that was my issue with AJ Hinch because Al Avila, who happens to be Hispanic, by the way, is sending text messages to him while he's sitting at home before the suspension's even over, saying, "You're going to be our guy." And AJ replies, "After the third out, I am open to talk to anybody." So as a general manager, okay, AJ Hinch managed Arizona. They were horrible. We don't know when the cheating started or stopped. This guy had no control of the clubhouse. And you still think that this guy is the right guy for your team with all the options being available? That was my issue because Alex, okay, with the Red Sox, is the only team that's being rumored on. He's won for them. So that owner has an attachment to Alex. Had AJ Hinch gone back, and the players. So had AJ Hinch gone back to Houston, I say, you know what? It makes sense. They know their guy. They're bringing him back because he was a part of this whole scandal. They're going to ride this together. But for a third party to come in and say, you're a good manager, what is he good with? We don't know. He cheated for his championship. We don't know. Obviously, if you can tell me he controlled the clubhouse, you're naive because he didn't control the clubhouse. He basically blamed.
But just the opposite, he's been known as a player's manager, right?
Correct. So and that's the issue. Again, if he had blamed Miguel Cabrera, saying Miguel took control of this clubhouse, I would say, you know what? I know Miguel. I can see that happening. He blamed Carlos Beltran. Okay, this guy is one of the nicest guys to ever put a uniform on. I don't see him doing that. So that was my issue, that all these executives are saying AJ Hinch is the first guy that we want. And I'm like, really? Like, you don't like him because he's a good manager. You like him because they're analytics. So if your computer is that good, wouldn't it matter who was on the bench?
Yeah, like
if he's a nice guy, bring in the other next nice guy, and we'll make him good with the computer. So that part I didn't understand the Tigers of where they're going with this. That they didn't have a big interview process. They were the way that it seemed that I don't even know why I got out.
I want to know, and I imagine that they don't care. But ownership, do they even contact the players?
No, they didn't contact that.
Like, and I think that matters, especially specifically with AJ. Like, I would
show up if I'm Miguel Cabrera. I would show up with a trash can the first day of spring training and say, as a joke, and say, is this going to be is this our scouting report? And what is he going to say in response? You got to address it.
Just the elephant in the room.
You have to. And as a player, so I was sad about the Tigers. Not so much about who they ended up with, because at the end of the day, that's their decision. The fact that there was so many candidates that were just like AJ Hinch. The White Sox situation, they were looking for someone with rings, experience, very small group. But AJ Hinch is like, okay, the ring that he got, it's questionable. So, okay, so you want an analytical guy that's good with young players. The list it was a huge list of guys that could have been.
And then the question, what also calls into question player manager, right? Like, was he good with the players because he let so much slide, right? Like
Correct.
Things that weren't supposed to slide. Like he was the parent that's trying to be the friend and not the parent.
I was just gonna say that he was the parent, like.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, Amy Poehler from
yes.
The Kris Jenner, who just wants to be the friend. You're doing amazing, sweetie. All right, let's move on to the free agent talk. There are so many free agents this year. We have the top 40 list, and some of the names that are on there is just so fascinating. First of all, a ton of shortstops, but we've got George Springer, we've got Marcell Ozuna, we've got Nelson Cruz, JT Realmuto, we've got Marcus Stroman. Does any of these, you want to pick one and go into any of these guys kind of call out to you here?
Well, Marcus Stroman being offered, I mean, do we see him back with the Mets? New ownership. I want to know, right? And then there was some controversy because Marcus Stroman is also very vocal, right? Like he liked the tweet criticizing or critiquing maybe Tony La Russa's hire. So I think that those are important players, especially the ones that are very vocal. Like not only are they good, but they are vocal. Like, are they going to be a good fit with these teams, with management and all of that stuff? So I would definitely keep my eye out on somebody like Marcus Stroman. I love Marcus. I think as far as it goes when it comes to being vocal, like they've compared him to Trevor Bauer. Like if he was as outspoken as Trevor Bauer, where would people take it? Because we see what Trevor Bauer does. But anyways, I say all this to say, like, Marcus Stroman is definitely a player that I'm looking to see where he ends up. Nelson Cruz, somebody that obviously he's our boy, and he's somebody that has been underrated for some reason for such a long time, but he's proven this season and season prior that he's still got a lot to offer in baseball.
So my biggest question, Ozzie, question for you is, we've seen during this offseason and this season, it kind of all blends together with the stop and start of spring training and then the 60-game abbreviated season. We saw guys being very open and very honest and very vocal on social media. When you look at the factors that go into free agencies and, either offering these guys a qualifying offer that teams are considering, not to mention, sure, there's all the financial issues that are going to be presented in 2021, and we'll get there with the new CBA, but the whole idea of social media playing such an active role in whether or not teams want to have these guys as part of their squad. You mentioned Trevor Bauer. He's another name on that list right now. How much of a factor is that going to be taken into consideration?
When you're Trevor Bauer, it gets taken a little less because he's been able to back it up with his playing. So you look at the side and say, I'll take the risk. That's completely different with Stroman. I think that the market is reevaluating itself, and I think that guys that are on the top, like Trevor Bauer is for pitching this year, they'll end up somewhere regardless of where they're at. I think it's a really bad time in baseball right now to be a free agent because everyone's going to be judged on the 60 games. Everyone's going to be judged, I think, really, really deeply assessed, and they're not going to be handing out money like crazy. I think guys are going to be taken. I would go with a guy like a Nelson Cruz if I was a general manager and go with him because he's done it for 6 years. so I can sign him to a short-term deal. And if he produces, I look like a genius. But someone like, for example, on the Stroman side, he's looking for multiple years. For him, I think that the best team that's going to sign anyone is the new owner. I think the Mets are the best team to land on right now because he just got his team. He wants to show off. He has his baby. He says, hey, here's my money. I want to spend. I can see Lindor.
I know we're not talking about this, but shout out to Steve Cohen and Bill de Blasio on making things happen in New York by having Steve Cohen pay out like $17 million for small businesses. I don't care what y'all guys say about Bill de Blasio, but he made that happen.
Wow.
So shout out to them because the small businesses needed out here in New York. But anyways, sidetrack.
Trust me, that $17 million is going to be added. I think that him as a new owner, he's going to spend. Lindor as a free agent starts becoming very attractive to him. I think Trevor Bauer is someone that can go there, and Stroman was just there, so I could see them bringing him back. Why not? So I think that teams are really, really going to look at the value of the player on performance and where they're coming at. We're already seeing some crazy moves of players, not even their options being picked up, when 2 years ago it would have been a blessing in disguise. Players are being smarter and not opting out of their contracts because they know that the market is kind of volatile at the moment. But it's going to be interesting. I think that the top guys that have performed really, really well are going to be okay. And then the guys that have done it for multiple years, like Nelson Cruz, anybody in the middle, it's going to be hard for them to land somewhere. And some guys are going to be paying, if not for a pay cut, for probably the same amount of money they were paying for last year.
I think that we're going to see a lot of pay cuts, and I think we're going to see a lot of players. I mean, we've already started seeing it, right? Their options not being picked up and just being re-signed for a lesser amount. Do you think we're going to see a lot of 1 year deals this season?
And you should take it. You should take it. If you have a 1 year deal and you're a player, do not sit there and try to argue months and months for a multiple year deal. I think someone like Stroman needs to take a page out of Trevor Bauer's book. They're compared a lot because of the Twitter, but Trevor went and did it. He bet on himself, had a great season in Cincinnati. Now they want him back. Everyone else wants him, and he's put himself in a position to make money. I think guys that didn't pitch this year are going to be hurt. So someone asks Stroman and says, hey, we're going to give you a 1 year deal for X amount of money. You take it just so you can perform and be able to show everybody that you are able to pitch, because it's going to be hard. There's a lot of players out there. I think that the players that sign early are going to be the winners. I think if you kind of hold yourself out, people look at Jesse Puig. We did not see him in the 2020 season, a guy that was a phenomenal player. Another market that we're going to consider is in the United States. Again, not to get political, we don't know what's going to happen. Okay, Major League Baseball is not going to have a season next year without fans in the stands. That's not going to happen. So there's got to be a vaccine. A lot's riding on the presidential election, how this moves forward. That opens up markets in Asia, where they had already a season with playoffs, with fans in it, with a market that has the money to pay a player. So we might see some players with big names that we never would have thought that would go there to play 1 or 2 years in Japan, because they will open up the market for them to try to bring in those big names. So it's going to get interesting, but a lot is riding in the 2021 season from a standpoint of preparing yourself as a player, but then owners saying, we're going to make this commitment, but do we have a season? So if someone calls your agent, okay, and they're offering a nice chunk of change, you should consider it. Again, owners are going to take advantage of this, but it's going to be a scary time for free agency this year.
Very, because the owners are crying poverty, right?
Yeah.
Because they're saying we lost out so much money and so much revenue. We didn't have butts in seats. And looking forward, there is such uncertainty as we approach the 2021 season. I mean, news just broke on Friday that winter meetings and owners talks have now been moved from in-person meetings, which would have been held in Dallas in the first or second week of December. It has now gone all to teleconferencing. So already we're seeing the changes. Not only that, we do not even have a start date yet, official start date for spring training. It's sometime in February. The other
I'm
part,
hearing it's later in March. But
you're hearing it's
revenue sharing, though. Revenue sharing, the poor teams.
Right. The poor teams are not getting their revenue sharing. So that's another point. The other point is that Are they going to play 162 if a vaccine isn't ready until and widely utilized until, say, June or July? Does it make any sense to even hold games before then? So we're looking at a season that may be truncated as well. There are so many factors that go into this, and it has such far-reaching tentacles that every action has a reaction when it comes to all of these new unprecedented times. I mean, at this point, and we'll wrap it up here as we end, but at this point, what is for certain as we look into the 2021 season? Can we say
nothing
for certain?
You know what? For me, the 2020 season of 60 games, everyone thought it was going to be a disaster, that it wasn't going to be good baseball, that it was going to be a COVID, wave of players just going down. To be honest, for the first time for them doing it, not being in a bubble like the NBA, which I think was much easier once it got started, I think Major League Baseball pulled it off at the end. There was baseball. Fans were excited. People were watching. So if next season, for some crazy reason, I hope that the owners keep open-minded, and if there's a chance to start without fans and let the vaccine come in, because there's a lot of things that Major League Baseball, I would look as an owner, that I can't control. And people don't understand this. The vaccine can be created today, but then there's a logistical issue on how do you get it out to the individuals. So I think if you can have the games start going in the season, and you can have games without fans and then shortly start introducing them, I'd rather have that than not have baseball till August and then have another 60-game season. Start without fans. Fans are going to get excited. Put all the new rules you want in place. But I really think I would be planning to start the season as early as possible and as normal as possible. And I hope that's the case in 2021.
Yeah, and I think more things will come into focus, I guess that's the way to put it, once the election is over. Like tomorrow, it's not going to be over, right? Like we already know they got to count a lot of votes and et cetera, et cetera. So I think by the end of this week, depending on how that goes, we'll kind of have a better picture of what things are going to look like moving forward after January, when either our current administration continues or we have a new administration. We know what those ideas and what those plans look like. So I think we'll have a better idea of what's going to happen with baseball.
Mr. Met got a raise. Mr. Met will get a raise with the new ownership.
Of course he will. Steve Cohen.
It's never been a better time to be a Mets fan. I know everyone wanted J-Lo and A-Rod, but when you get someone with the pockets of Mr.
You got
Cohen,
money.
and the passion, hold on. People forget this. He is a huge fan. When you have an owner that's a fan, he wants to go in those rooms and show off. He's a New Yorker. He wants to look over to the Yankees, who have not won, by the way. So now it's a race to who can win one before the other one. He knows that, and he wants to show off. So that's who's winning today.
Absolutely. And case in point, he took to Twitter and he said, "Hey, Mets fans, this was so brilliant." He said, "Hey, Mets fans, what can I do to make your experience better as a baseball fan? I'm sorry. I don't know about you guys. I've never heard a real owner say
Not
that.
The Will Bonds.
Anyway,
don't even get me started there.
But like that right there, if he didn't have people on his side, well, he sure got them on the real Axelrod train. But incredible stuff out of New York. Very much looking forward to covering that story as it develops. So thank you, everybody, for watching. That's going to do it for us. If you haven't
safe, everyone.
Stay safe and go out and vote. Do it in person and wear a mask. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on Wednesday.